everyone, and welcome to this AM IUN oral history project. My name is Mina Mahmood, and today I'm here joined with Dr. Rutherford. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do and why you were here today?
Yeah, sure thing. So my name is Dr. Maureen Rutherford. I am an associate professor of psychology and currently the department chair. I've been a part of IUN as an instructor since 2011. And I was also a student here back in 2001 to 2005.
Thank you for sharing that with us. So we're going to get started. I have a couple of questions that I wrote out for you, but you are welcome to share any information you're comfortable with sharing with us here today. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is a little bit about your college journey. If you could share kind of an overview of what your process of your college journey was like and how it really shaped your interest in psychology and neuroscience.
Sure. So I guess I first became interested in psychology more generally in high school. And so when I was looking for colleges, I was looking for something that had a really good pre-med program because I was interested in pursuing something to do with medicine, but also the brain and possibly overlap with psychology. And we had somebody come to my high school to talk a little bit about scholarship programs. And so I became interested in IUN that way and ended up enrolling in the fall of 2001. During my first semester, I guess of an interesting side note is September 11th happened, my third week of my freshman year. And I think that has also shaped a little bit about my student experience here throughout. I think after that experience, I was able to do or get involved a little bit more with on-campus activities and clubs, even though I worked off campus. And then, the shadowing and volunteering experiences really helped me understand that maybe pre-med wasn't the best path for me, and I ended up going to graduate school in neuroscience instead. So yeah, a little bit about that.
Thank you for sharing that. During your college journey, were there any specific classes or experiences that you did? I know you said you volunteered and you also definitely attended psychology and neuroscience related classes. Were there any particular courses that you think really shaped a genuine interest in those topics for you? Yeah.
I ended up actually double majoring in chemistry and psychology. My first year of general chemistry actually was really interesting for me, especially because I had a bad experience with chemistry in high school. Mm-hmm. And so getting into that actually sparked my interest in that. And then I added the second major in psychology later. And ended up just loving every single course. I don't think there's one that I could potentially pinpoint other than the ones directly relating back to the brain. So behavioral neuroscience, drugs in the nervous system, those were a couple courses that were really helped kind of highlight that investigating what the brain is doing. Mm-hmm. That seemed to be more interesting to me than I guess working in a clinic. So that was
what kind of solidified your passion.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. Did you have any experiences or mentors in your college journey, or even your family or any support system outside of college, mm-hmm. that also helped you make you want to pursue this path that you ended up taking?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I had a double major, I also did research experiences in both of the departments. Mm-hmm. So I did research under Dr. Attila Tankay with organic chemistry. Don't ask me exactly the specifics of it at this point, but that also helped me really find the value in research experience. I also did research under Dr. Mark Hoyert, who's now the dean, mm-hmm. On introductory psychology. We were looking at an intervention with regards to growth mindset and things like that. So those experiences really helped me to see, research is actually really cool. And, again, looking at the reasons behind things are working and being able to understand or really showed me that this is something I could potentially focus on for my career. It wasn't something that, as a first generation college student, I just wasn't aware of. Like, I didn't know that you could actually, go to graduate school and do research. I literally had no idea that that was even a potential career pathway. So having those research experiences were really important for me.
That's good. What was the meaning of a college degree in your family growing up? And you said you are a first generation student, so did you have high expectations of yourself as a kid, or did your family have high expectations of you when pursuing education?
Yeah, absolutely. So growing up, I was told, like, okay, after you go to high school, you go to college. I, again, had no idea any other option existed. It wasn't until high school where people were like, oh, I'm just gonna like find a job after high school, or I'm going into the military. And I'm like, oh, like, I just thought everybody went to college. And so I think that expectation was set for me very early. And that helped me, again, kind of make the choices I made in high school and college. And so parents were always, I wouldn't say like super pushy. They just supported me and always recommended that I just get as much education as I could, really helping me to become also independent and be able to kind of provide a life for myself. Again, my family helped support me in that.
Okay, that's good. Thank you for sharing that with me. Did you ever encounter any challenges or obstacles that you think really got in the way of your mindset when you were in college?
Yeah, for one thing, for me, it was sometimes difficult to time manage, as probably most students. I was also working off campus at one point, working like full-time or working multiple jobs, which was hard to balance with my classwork. The scholarship that I had was only good for 4 years, so I was very stressed with trying to get all the coursework for the double major done within the 4 years. And then also the concerns about, what do I want to do for my next steps? So getting to my like junior, senior year, like I said, up to that point, I was very interested in pursuing a pre-med pathway. And then it was, I had all these different experiences with shadowing and volunteering and research and my coursework. And it was really hard for me to make that decision, like, nope, I want to change my mind. I want to instead go to graduate school. At that point, I had already taken the MCAT twice. I had already like started my med school applications. So it was really a tough call to make, but one that ultimately I think I made the right call. So
that's good. I'm glad you feel that way.
Yeah, I know a lot of students can be worried that they're, making, or it's really hard to make those kind of like next steps decisions. And sometimes I wish I would have maybe waited a little bit, maybe taken a gap year to get more experience to help guide what I wanted to do next. But it ultimately worked out for me. But if anybody's interested in taking a gap year, I think that that's always a good call.
That's true.
Yeah.
Was there a specific moment in your college journey where you got interested in doing academic advising like you do now, or that kind of led you away from the pre-med path and more towards working one-on-one and engaging with students and teaching and advising?
I would say that an interest in teaching really didn't come about for me until I was in grad school. Like as a first gen, I applied for and got into grad school, and then when I got there, I was like, okay, well, what do you do with a doctorate in neuroscience? Had no idea. Throughout the time I was there, I got some feedback and advice from other mentors and other students, like, oh, you can pursue research as a career, you can teach as a career, you can go into into industry, but really what sparked my interest in teaching was I had to prepare a lecture for one of my courses, and I just got really excited about it, and I'm like, oh, we can talk about all of these cool topics, and I wanted to find like all of the most interesting literature to support it, and that's when it was like, oh, maybe this is something that you should do. And so that wasn't until like my third year of grad school. So also, if again, to students, if you're not 100% sure what you want to do while you're in undergrad, that's totally fine too. Like sometimes it reveals itself to you later.
That's a good point. I also wanted to kind of touch on what you're doing now with the Rutherford lab. So for those who don't know, would you like to kind of talk about what the aim of your lab is right now and how long it's been going on and how you kind of got into it?
Yeah, so our lab uses a zebrafish model to study the impact of a variety of things like physical or chemical stressors on stress responses, behavioral mainly, but we're also interested in investigating physiological responses to stress. A new pathway that our lab is taking with support from some of our campus grants is studying the impact of pollutants and other chemicals on early life development of stress responses. So that is kind of the main focus. We're really interested in especially how that relates back to vulnerability for different psychological conditions. What's really cool about studying stress in fish is that they have a highly conserved stress response. And so it can tell us a lot about how stress responses can be regulated and how they can be potentially impacted, which, you know, stress is a trigger for a lot of psychological conditions and has evolved with a lot of psychological and physical health conditions, really. So understanding more about those links is going to help us hopefully develop better treatments, be able to recognize, you know, vulnerability for stress-related conditions, so a lot of fun things. One of the coolest parts about my research is being able to involve students in research, as you know, and really giving them kind of that taste of like what a scientific career pathway is like, what, you know, how we can evaluate scientific information, kind of being more a smart consumer of information. A lot of different things go into doing research, and so that's one of my favorite parts.
Yeah, I can say I'm a little bit biased because I obviously do work in your lab too. But more on that, as a faculty member and a researcher yourself, how do you go about going further and involving undergraduate and graduate students into contributing their own insight and their own work into your lab?
Yeah, so recently I developed an internship program where I'll have a group of first-year students come in for the spring semester and just start to kind of dip their toe, learn about the lab, learn about how to care for the general fish colony, how to read literature, and then the second year come back and kind of build on those skills that they've started in the first year. And then hopefully next year I'll have some third years wanting to return. This is, you know, a relatively recent development in the lab. But my hope is to kind of spread those research experiences out across the time that students are here, and so that they're getting a little bit of research experience and kind of developing those skills and ultimately coming up with an independent project by the end. And then being able to design the project, collect all the data, analyze it, and report it out either at a conference or a paper. So that's how students here can even contribute to scientific knowledge. I've had students co-author publications with me and present at conferences locally and even internationally. So you know, they kind of get that experience here, which is really cool.
That's exciting. That's exciting for me too. And I have to ask, do you have any plans or goals for the Rutherford lab moving forward in the coming years? Is there anything that you plan on evolving or expanding, or just anything that you have in mind right now?
Yeah, really I want to continue on the work that we're just recently starting with the internship program and this kind of new branch out into studying the developmental impacts of pollutants, and hopefully building up collaborations with other universities, and then also expanding out what kind of measurements we can take. Because right now we're focusing mainly on behavioral responses. We've also done hormonal responses in the adults, although we haven't really developed anything to assess that in the developing fish yet. So that's a future plan or goal. And then ultimately, building on to understanding not only what happens after pollutant exposure in early life on those kind of short-term responses, but also allowing those fish to grow up and study them in adulthood, and then potentially even after generations. Like, what are the maybe epigenetic generational impacts of this early life exposure?
That is very cool.
Yeah.
And I've also found it very profound in the time that I've spent working in your lab too. I'm obviously interested in neuroscience myself, so it does definitely help kind of pave the way and put you in the shoes of a researcher, which I definitely like. A little bit about what you are also doing at the same time right now is academic advising. Were there any of your own college experiences that you went through that have helped shape the advice or mentoring that you give to other students now?
For sure. So I've already kind of talked about a little bit about being a first generation student and not really knowing things that again, I wasn't able to get from like parents or family. And so I want to make sure that I impart kind of that information and just being really understanding that like students don't know what they don't know. And so kind of putting myself back into the shoes of a student for a little bit and trying to understand, okay, you know, even if it's like unwritten rules or ethics of like, or not even ethics, like protocols or like what are expectations for, you know, reaching out for letters of recommendation or, you know, what to be aware of with deadlines or writing personal statements. You know, those kinds of things that, again, I didn't know as a student. So now I want to make sure that everybody kind of knows these things and are kind of best setting them up for success in their next steps and also while they're here.
Thank you for sharing that. I know that you also, well, I know this because I've been in 2 of your classes already, but you also teach neuroscience and psychology courses here on campus. Are there any, well, I know this myself, you teach in a very innovative way, I would say. I feel like compared to other professors, you teach in a more non-traditional sense. How did that come to be? What inspired you to teach in your more student-paced rate?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first started teaching, I modeled a lot of what I got, which was very traditional, like lecture-based, not a whole lot of interaction. But as I grew as an instructor and, you know, started to learn more about evidence-based practices and like what are the practices that truly support student interest in learning, I've had tons of opportunities as I've been an instructor for professional development. Most recently, a course that I took with a lot of other faculty delivered by AQ. And so we've learned a lot about those kinds of practices and, you know, how do we implement them? What is the impact on student learning and success? I've also done a little bit of reading and interest on trauma-informed teaching. So understanding that like students are all coming in, well, not all, but a lot of students are coming into the classroom with life trauma or educational trauma in early life educational settings, or, you know, the impact of the pandemic can be considered a chronic trauma or stress, and trying to adopt those practices that are going to, again, best support student learning. If we can keep the classroom like safe and predictable and have good structure and interaction, develop those skills and knowledge that students are going to need, you know, it's not hard to see the impact. So yeah.
That's good. I definitely see the impact myself. And on that note, how do you kind of go about dumbing down or making very difficult, like incomprehensible topics more comprehensible to students?
So, and I guess I would think of it in a way of making it, making concepts transparent and also, again, putting myself into the shoes of a student who's hearing all of these things for the first time. How would I explain it to, you know, again, everybody's coming into the classroom with slightly different background, knowledge, and personal life experiences. So everybody's going to be coming at this from a different angle. And so how am I going to kind of meet everybody in the middle and present things that can be complicated in a way that, again, is understandable? And so, again, I always try to think of it as like, what would I need to know if I was hearing this for the first time? And so that helps, because I know sometimes it's easy to slide into, okay, I've heard this 1,000 times. I can make it more complicated or use a lot of jargon. I could do those things, but again, that's not my target audience. Myself is not my target audience. My target audience is somebody who's learning it for the first time. And so that's something I really try hard to keep in the forefront of my mind when we're going over complicated or new things. And also just incorporating like examples that are relevant, things that people can relate to, examples that are interesting, or I try to keep as current as possible. So all of those, I think, help to get the message across, because that's really the point of me being there, is to be able to facilitate complicated things and make it digestible.
That's good. Thank you for kind of explaining that to me, because I know when I, took your classes, I always wondered why she uses the model that she does. And then it was until after I took other classes that I realized, like, it seems kind of intentional. It does seem to work a lot better. It's more student focused. Another thing that I've wanted to ask you for a while now is that, this is kind of a open-ended question, but of all the content that you've learned over the course of your career, through all of your opportunities, through your internships and things like that, what has been the most interesting piece of knowledge that you've learned or that has stuck with you? One of those things that's just like has been so significant to you.
That's a really good question. And I could probably spout off all sorts of things that I found interesting throughout my career. But I think some of the most interesting information that I've learned has challenged assumptions or things that I thought I knew. So from like a very young age, the perspectives that I was brought up with regards to drug use, for example, or, anything that, again, challenges something that I thought that I knew has been really impactful for me, and again, kind of makes me step back and think, okay, well, why do I think like this, or why do I approach this topic? Anything that I have like a personal bias or anything that kind of, again, some sort of neutral information that triggers an emotional response, it's something for me to step back and be like, okay, why do I think this way? And like really help to challenge myself. Because if you, I feel oftentimes if we're presented with new information that triggers an emotional response, we're not likely to incorporate that or really think about it critically. And so anything like that again triggers some sort of emotion in me, I want to take a step back and learn more about it and try to think critically about it, and especially examine my own biases, because everybody has them, and I really think that it limits our growth as people, as humans, if we don't challenge what we think we know.
Definitely. Psychology is interesting because you also use the psychology on yourself to understand if you actually understand anything. Another thing I noticed that you often bring up in your classes is considering diverse perspectives, and you do that in a lot of your classes. So I know that's something that you are an advocate about. Why is this meaningful to you?
Yeah, excellent. So that's really also an interesting and difficult question, but hopefully one that isn't one that I guess requires a. Okay, I guess I need to. Hold on. Let me rephrase that. So that's a really good question, and one that I've thought a lot about, especially, I guess, probably. I'm trying to think of when I first really focused on incorporating diverse perspectives, but really coming into the classroom and especially seeing kind of the diversity of our students, the diversity of our faculty, and understanding that traditionally in educational settings and academia, that a lot of groups have been historically excluded from the conversations. And really, from a purely scientific perspective, like if we're not incorporating everybody's knowledge and interests and perspectives, then we really aren't going to be able to come up with complete solutions. And like you said, with psychology and understanding more about the human experience, we really have to understand everybody. And so making sure to incorporate those aspects of diversity and like calling out when there's a lack of representation is really important to me, because I feel like my students are going to be the change makers, that they're going to go out and say, okay, this is a problem. I'm now aware of this as an issue, and now I want to go out and do something about it. And so I think that that's one of the main reasons that I feel feel that it's important to incorporate this within the content as well.
That's very interesting. I find that inspiring too, and I do think it does make a big difference in acknowledging like a student's own experiences and then incorporating it into their course content, which is very good.
And I think it's also really important because oftentimes if students don't see themselves represented in the content or represented in career pathways, then it's really hard for them to envision themselves in that kind of a pathway, or that their voice it matters or is important. And obviously I want to make sure all of my students see themselves in the content, see themselves as a way, or as science, psychology, neuroscience, as a way for them to make a career or make an impact, make a difference.
Definitely. So I know that you are not only a department chair, an advisor, and a professor, you are also a parent and a wife. So how do you balance all of the responsibilities that you deal with on a daily basis?
It's a great question. And one that I feel like just takes work. And part of this is really applying what I've learned about stress and what I've learned about like psychology in general, and really have tried over the last couple years especially to create a better work-life balance for myself, also as a model to my students. Because if I am working 80 hours a week, I'm not spending time with my family, which is really important to me, then that's not something I want to show my students as a healthy way to live their life. And so again, I always try to think of like, okay, is this something that I would recommend to students or recommend to my friends or my colleagues? And that has helped me take better care of myself. I also try to get my hobbies in as well as extended family time. Those things are really important to me. So it's not always the easiest, and I have to understand, like, after doing this for so long, I know that there are different times of the semester that are going to be busier than others, and that I am going to have to take a little bit more time to grade papers or develop new content or get things ready to present at conferences. And then there will be times during the year that'll be a little bit slower, like during the summer, where I can focus more so on those other parts of my life. And so just trying to keep all of that in mind, and just knowing that it's a work in progress. That's, I guess that's the best advice I have.
Since you grew up as a first-generation student yourself, what advice or changes have you made? Let me rephrase that. So I know that you were a first-generation student yourself. When, in regards to your kids, what kind of advice for college would you give them that is different than what you received growing up?
Gotcha. So the advice that I received was just like, okay, just go to college, do well in school, and it will pay off for you in the long run. But nothing like super concrete. So I feel like I've been able to, my kids are still relatively young, but we've talked a little bit about, things that they want to do when they grow up and things like that. And I've always emphasized that I want them to be able to create a life for themselves that they are happy with, that they're satisfied, and whatever that looks like, I will support them in that pathway. And if this is something that requires a pathway that you're interested in, if it requires pursuing higher education, we have the tools to be able to help you with that. What are the times and like what are the things that you need to do to make yourself most competitive for different programs, and like what are the skills you need to work on now. We're working a lot with my kiddos on, just like what are the things that you need to do in school, managing time with your projects, and conversing well with your teachers. Even though they're still relatively young, still kind of just getting those habits down early, I think it will pay off for them in the long run. Even if they don't decide to go to college, I'm sure that those are skills that they're going to need. Working with other people, whatever career pathway, you're going to have to deal with people, and doing that as effectively as possible. We can start to set those bases of those skills down now.
Definitely. Another thing that I was kind of thinking about is, this is something I often do myself, but when you learn psychology for so long and things neuroscience related, are there any lessons that you've taken away that you apply to your family or people outside of school things that you've learned that you try to help others with, or to manage their stress or things like that?
Yeah, I think it is really like learning a lot about psychology has really helped me to understand people's perspectives and like understanding that if they're doing something or thinking something, to kind of take a step back and like, okay, explain, not necessarily explain why, but understand that there are a lot of different factors that might be influencing them at that one time. So if, you know, I have a negative interaction with somebody in the general public, it's like, okay, maybe they were just having a bad day. You know, I try not to take those things personally because I know everybody is their own little universe, and that again helps keep it in perspective for my own, like how I'm navigating the world, but also I think helps me you know, talk with family, friends about stress, like because I know a lot about it. It's a lot of times people have questions like, okay, why do I do this, or why, you know, like what are some better ways to manage this? And then I have a little bit of additional knowledge that I can help out with that. So, so yeah, I think it does pay off in other areas of my life.
That's good. I feel like I already do that. And my parents are like, oh, don't be a know-it-all.
Yeah.
You also mentioned your hobbies, and I know you do enjoy roller derbying. So are there any hobbies like that, or other ones that you think also help you cope with stress that you wanted to kind of talk about?
Yeah, so roller derby is the big one. That one's probably what I spend my most time on. And then I also like to read fiction mainly. In my spare time, I guess I don't read a whole lot of nonfiction because I do that a lot for work. So I have like a reading goal every year. I try to get outside when I can. Exercise is a really good stress reduction technique. And yeah, spending time with all my family. I have a really big extended family, and so pretty much weekends, vacations, and things like that, evenings are spent with family. They're some of my best friends, so it's, again, having that support network is really important to me.
That's good. To kind of go back to your college, your time in college, were there any meaningful lessons or insights or advice that you learned during your time of college that you find significant today, or that you think have helped you with advancing your own career?
So I had mentioned that I worked a lot as an undergrad, and I think that that's something that, again, I try to bring back to my students. I know sometimes it's inevitable. People have to work to support families. They have to work to help support parents. But if those factors aren't an issue, really spending the time that you have on your studies, I really wish I would have done that a little bit more. I did have to work for, you know, some financial reasons, but I probably didn't have to work as much as I did. So I really wish I would have taken that extra time to just make the most out of it, maybe do a little bit more on-campus activities. I did some, but I feel like I would have probably benefited from a little bit more of that time, and also just becoming more efficient with study techniques. I kind of was all over the place. I feel like for my 4 years of undergrad, it wasn't until I was in grad school where I really found some effective techniques for me. So those are also things that I try to share with my students whenever I find them, because I'm like, don't be like me, don't do this. So those are, I guess, some of my take-home lessons that I do try to impart with my to my students, but also has kind of carried on with me since then.
That's good. Thank you for sharing that with me. Another thing I wanted to ask, and you can answer this however you feel comfortable answering it, but do you have any goals or dreams of yourself when envisioning yourself 5 to 10 years in the future from now? Is there anything that you'd like to advance in your career, or even with the lab, or anything that you see changing?
That's actually a really good question. I feel like I've reached a really important part of my career where I've kind of checked off all of my long-term goals, but that doesn't mean that I'm done by any means. I'm still, I feel like, mid-career-ish, so there's a lot of good that I can still do. So I think a lot of it is just continuing on with the work that I've started, being able to provide those really critical experiences for students in the lab, being able to refine my teaching to be even more effective, being able, as chair, during my time as chair, to be able to support our other faculty, maybe kind of adding on with those responsibilities and doing more at the campus level or maybe even within the university structure. Those things are going to be important to me as the years go on, because I can make an impact on my classroom, but I can also kind of be a little bit more involved with maybe faculty governance to help, what are the important things that need to go on for the campus as a whole, and kind of secure the future of our students and the future of the campus. I guess there aren't like really concrete things that I could say like check off, but really just kind of, again, continuing the work that I've already started, with the goals of impacting as many students in a positive way as I can.
That's inspiring. Do you have any long-term goals outside of school that you're hoping to accomplish over the next few years?
Like I said, I kind of want to be able to be there for my kids. We're, I don't want to say halfway through their childhood, but pretty much about halfway, being able to support them and get them started in early adulthood so they can kind of be independent. I have derby goals, right? Be able to, again, just have fun and contribute to the league. We do a lot of volunteering, but also just to help be around and support other skaters and other league members. Just kind of do well in my little sphere of influence. That's about all I can hope for.
That's good. So my last question for you, and this is one that I've been asking a lot of different people, and I've heard a lot of different crazy and inspiring things, so I thought you'd be the perfect person to ask as well. If you could go back and give your younger self in college one piece of advice, what would it be and why?
Oh my goodness. One piece of advice I think my piece of advice would be to challenge myself more. I feel like this isn't something that I really got into a habit. I feel like generally I'm a more cautious person. I spend a lot of time evaluating consequences and not really taking a whole lot of risks. So I feel like in college would have been a better place to kind of develop some of those skills and help myself like go outside the box. Like for example, I know it sometimes doesn't seem like it, but I'm very introverted sometimes. And I have a hard time talking to new people. So one of the things I do at conferences is I force myself to go and like talk to at least like 3 new people. And I wish this is something that I would have just started earlier, because I feel like I would have had a lot more confidence and skill in that. So whatever, I guess, advice to my younger self would be to just kind of challenge yourself more, go outside the box a little bit more, find those things that feel like limitations and just challenge them, because like what's the worst that can happen? I think at this point in my life I'm like, okay, like what's the worst that can happen? Somebody doesn't talk to you, oh no, like that's not gonna be the end of the world. But to like my 18-20-year-old self, that would have been, kind of hard to deal with. So I think that is something that I would have told my younger self.
Thank you for sharing that. So that pretty much concludes this AM IUN project. I wanted to say thank you so much for coming in and being one of the many faculty members to join us. Your guys' insight and perspectives are always appreciated and welcomed by students, even if you don't think that they are. I promise you that we do definitely think about them, and they are helpful in our own college success stories. So thank you for coming today.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
This concludes our AM IUN project. I should probably redo that. This concludes our AM IUN project today. Thank you for watching. I'm going to redo it again. I feel like it's so awkward.
No, you're good.
This concludes our AM IUN project today. Thank you all for watching.